Alright, so we're going to take this assembly apart. We're going to take these control arms off, and the correct way to tighten these things once they're on the car is to get the car on the ground at ride height and then torque them down at that point, because they have rubber bushings that don't pivot. They're locked into here, and then the rubber bushing kind of pivots. So if you tighten them down when they're in this position, and then the car sets back down on the ground and it twists it up to here, now it's under tremendous stress the whole time, going like this, and you'll end up stressing out and probably breaking it prematurely. So these are set at the right height right now, so I'm just going to mark them so that I can put the new ones on in this height, and then I don't have to worry about putting the car back down on the ground, getting it on the floor, and then trying to sneak up in here and tighten these. And it can be done, but it's easier now that I have these things at the correct location. I'm just going to mark them, and then I'll transfer the marks over to the new ones, and then we won't have to take that extra step once we get them installed. Alright, so I'm just going to make a couple of simple marks with a Sharpie on this control arm in reference to this upper shock mount. And you can see the two black marks, and I will just transfer those black marks onto the new one, so that when I put it in, I don't put it in like this or like that, but more so that they both line up like that. And that should get me close enough. It doesn't have to be precise. I just don't want to lock it down here and then have the car come to rest in this position. Okay, here we are. These are 16mm bolts to get these control arms off. Okay, now you can probably get the idea of why I mark these things, because they go in here and you can tighten them down anywhere. But now I've got them marked so I can get them in the ballpark of where they need to be, so that I don't lock it down here and have this rubber bushing stressing constantly and perhaps failing. That's loose. Alright, so now we need to compress this spring. So that we can disassemble this strut assembly. Okay, so we're going to compress this spring with my new spring compressor kit that I purchased. This will be my first time using it. This is from the Eastwood Company. Item number 31655. So we'll see how this works. Alright, here we are. So I've selected the right size compressors to fit the spring. And now we will set it on here and see if we can't squeeze this spring so that we can get this shock out of here. Alright, so let's see if we can't squeeze this spring. Keep going. Alright, that spring is in there very good. It's seated perfectly. It's got lips so it cannot come out. And now my shock is loose. Always a little nervous when I'm compressing springs, but this tool, first time I've used it, but it's very nice. Alright, got a couple of bolts here to remove this top hat. Alright, so now we've got our last fastening bolt. We should be able to slide this strut right out. This is an 18 millimeter. I'm going to see if I can zing that off without the whole thing spinning. And the answer is yes. Alright, so here's the old... Oh my goodness. Oh, I guess that's not too bad. Yeah, these things are shot and need to be replaced. I'm going to take note of the orientation of this rubber boot, because this is where the spring, the end of the spring sits here, and so this can obviously go in any position, but it looks like the end of the spring lines up with this hole here. Oh, actually, we have a little index notch here that lines up with a notch here. So hopefully my new shock also has that index notch, so there will be no question about where it goes. But look at this shock, it isn't even coming out. Ugh. Listen to that. Yeah, this thing is no good. Okay, so here I am with the old shock and the spring perch there that's locked in place with the indexed spot where the spring goes, and my new shock with this perch that doesn't have any index at all to tell me which direction it goes in. So what I'll do is I will just set these side by side. And line them up. And then we're going to mark them. Just like that. So now when I assemble it, I'll make sure this thing is oriented in the right spot so that then when I set the spring in there, the spring is going to be in the same location. I don't want to have it twisted and then not have the top tower cap not line up correctly and be fighting with the thing. Alright, now it's time to reassemble this whole strut. Get this. We've got the bump stop and the dust boot. We've got the shock mount. Washer. Nut with neoprene lock nut on it. And so now I don't have a 19mm box wrench, or I would just grab this nut with an Allen wrench holding the shock rod. So I'm going to have to use a 19mm washer or socket while I hold the strut rod with an Allen wrench and then turn the socket with my vice grips. Okay, that's nice and tight. And now we're going to want to release this spring, but this is when we want to have everything lined up perfectly. So that's lined up. That's lined up. And now we release the spring while everything's lined up, and it should be, oh, that's not the right socket. Okay, so the perch is lined up on the strut. The springs are lined up on the rubber mounts. Everything looks good. Yeah, everything looks good. Push up the bump stop in place. And everything looks good. And now this goes back on. How many different ways can this go, I wonder? Well, that's the way it came off. Make sure the strut mount is pressed in there nice and tight. And I think I'm going to sock those in by hand. And there we have it. All ready to go for the control arms. Alright, so I'm happy with this spring compressor. This worked out beautiful. Glad I bought it. I think it was like $110 or something. Well worth it. Well worth it. The springs lock in there, they're not coming out. No need to be scared to death. Okay, so before I mount these, install these control arms, I'm going to transfer the marks that I made on them. There is the right one. They're marked, so the right and lefts are different. And this is the right one, so it's the passenger side. You're always right and left from inside the vehicle, obviously. Not right and left from standing in front of the vehicle looking at it. It's That's why whenever I order parts from a parts department, I always stipulate passenger side or driver's side. I don't take my chances with the right and left. Alright, so I got those marks over here. Okay, so you'll notice that these are different lengths. I don't know if they say forward or rear. No, they don't. They just say left and right. So the front one is longer. So that makes this the front one. So the shock goes in like so. This one would be up front. I'm going here. This one is the back. Goes in here. And of course these things are facing down. And this kit comes with beautiful new hardware. Very nice. And when I took these out, the nut is on the inside, so I'm just going to put the nut back on the inside so I don't have to worry about clearance issues once I've reassembled the whole thing. And I believe these were 16 mil. Yep. So where's my 16 millimeter socket? Alright, snugged them so I can still, when I move this, the whole bushing is turning. Once you clamp it down, the bushing no longer turns, and it's just the arm that moves, stretching the bushing. So we'll just snug them up, and then we can get the arm in the correct position, and then we can just give it a quick torque and lock them in place. Come on. Okay, see my marks? And so this is right where it needs to be at rest. So then when the suspension goes down, it can flex up, and when the suspension comes up, it can move like this. And in the neutral resting position, it's just resting, which is nice. So that's why that's important, to get the whole full life out of your bushings. Typically these bushings are pretty durable, and it's the ball joint that kind of wears out before anything else. Well, that's what I've found, but I mean, maybe that's because I do this step carefully. If you mount these in the wrong position, these other end bushings might fail. Okay, here we are. This is ready to go back in the car. I believe. Let's just double check everything. Got no extra parts. The mount is up there inside. Springs, bump stop. Everything's in there. And it looks good. So I'm happy with this. Alright, back to the car.